You don't avoid money because you're irresponsible. You avoid it because your brain decided it was safer not to look. At some point, thinking about money stopped feeling neutral and started feeling expensive. Not financially expensive, mentally expensive. Just opening the app felt like work. Just seeing the number felt like pressure. And over time, your system learned something simple and dangerous. Engagement doesn't lead to relief, it leads to tension. So before you consciously decide anything, your body steps in. You forget, you delay. You suddenly feel busy, not because you don't care, but because caring has a cost. You're someone who thinks deeply, someone who notices consequences, which means when money feels unresolved, your mind doesn't skim it lightly. It goes all the way in. It anticipates outcomes, it runs scenarios, and that depth makes avoidance look like failure from the outside, but internally it feels like preservation. Because every time you tried to deal with it, you didn't feel clearer afterward. You felt heavier, more alert, like something new needed managing. So the system adapted, and now avoidance doesn't feel like a choice, it feels automatic. This reflex didn't come from nowhere. It was trained quietly, before you had language for it. Long before bills or stakes, money already carried emotional weight. Arguments that changed the room, tension you could feel but weren't allowed to ask about, silence that felt heavier than words. As a child, you didn't analyze money. You tracked what happened to people when it appeared. Shifts in tone, in posture, in energy. Your nervous system recorded all of it without commentary. Over time, money stopped being information and became a signal that something might go wrong, that stability might be fragile. Even if no one ever said, "Don't think about money," the pattern was obvious. Thinking about it didn't calm anyone down, it escalated things. So your system learned to stay ahead of that escalation, to soften it, to avoid it. And when that pattern forms early, it doesn't feel like fear later, it feels like instinct. Like knowing when not to touch something that never ended well before. Once that association is in place, the nervous system takes over. It doesn't wait for logic. The moment money enters awareness, the body remembers the cost. Tightness, alertness, a subtle sense that something now needs managing. And because the nervous system's job is to conserve energy and prevent overload, it looks for the fastest exit. Avoidance isn't passive, it's regulation. Not opening the app lowers arousal. Delaying the decision prevents the spike. That small wave of relief you feel when you don't look isn't accidental, it's chemical. Your system just rewarded disengagement, and the brain learns quickly from relief, so it starts intervening earlier and earlier. You don't wait until you're overwhelmed. Resistance shows up first. Fog, heaviness, a sense that now isn't the right time. And because this happens below conscious awareness, it feels reasonable, sensible, like timing, not avoidance. The nervous system doesn't track truth, it tracks cost. And if money thinking consistently demanded vigilance, emotional control, and effort, it got categorized as expensive. So the system limits exposure. The problem is that regulation quietly becomes the goal instead of resolution. Calm starts to matter more than clarity. And once relief is tied to disengagement, the system will choose short-term calm every time, even as long-term pressure quietly accumulates underneath. This is where avoidance turns into identity. Because on the surface, you believe you should be able to handle this. You're thoughtful, capable. You don't avoid hard things elsewhere in your life. So when money triggers hesitation, the discomfort isn't financial. It's personal. It threatens who you think you are. To protect that identity, the mind builds explanations. You're not avoiding, you're pacing. You're being strategic. You'll deal with it when things calm down. Those stories don't interrupt the pattern. They stabilize it. They allow avoidance to continue without feeling like failure. Slowly, loyalty shifts, not toward growth, but toward familiarity. Engaging fully starts to feel reckless, like crossing an internal boundary that once kept you stable. Over time, avoidance hardens into self-description. Someone who doesn't like dealing with money. Someone who keeps things vague to stay sane. And once that belief sets in, avoidance stops feeling like a response. It feels like a trait. That's when the psychological mechanisms lock it in. Loss aversion rises. Not losing internal stability becomes more important than gaining clarity. Present bias tightens the loop. Immediate relief from not looking outweighs any future benefit of understanding. Guilt loops fill the gap. You feel guilty for postponing, but that guilt only increases vigilance. It doesn't create movement. Repetition strengthens neural pathways. The response becomes faster, efficient, harder to interrupt. Money dysmorphia develops alongside it. Your perception warps around the effort required to think. Numbers feel heavier than they are. Situations feel more fragile. Progress doesn't register because engaging with it feels costly. Identity-based income ceilings form quietly, not because you consciously reject growth, but because expansion implies more attention, more decisions, more exposure. So part of you resists moving forward, while another part wants it desperately, and that internal conflict keeps the system suspended. The loop tightens without drama. The more you avoid, the more unfinished money lives in the background, not as a clear problem, but as constant low-grade alertness. You're regulated but never settled. Then when money comes up again, you're already depleted. Thinking feels harder than it should. That confirms the prediction. Engagement is costly, so avoidance happens faster next time, earlier, with less resistance. Each cycle shrinks the window where clarity feels possible. You stop engaging to understand. You engage only when pressure forces you to. That trains your brain to associate money thinking with stress instead of resolution. Fog becomes familiar. Familiar starts to feel safe. And because nothing breaks loudly, nothing demands interruption. The pattern disguises itself as being busy, being tired, being realistic. But underneath all of it, the system has learned one rule and keeps following it without question. Distance feels safer than clarity. And if avoidance feels automatic, if not looking feels calming, then the system isn't failing. It's working exactly as it learned to. Somewhere along the way, your brain decided that clarity was dangerous and disengagement was safer. And once that decision was made, everything else organized around it. The unsettling question isn't why you avoid money. It's how long your system has been quietly running a rule you never consciously chose, and how much of your financial life has been shaped by a brain that learned early and repeatedly that not looking felt safer than looking at all.